Ron, do you have the quote that you could show on the screen?
Sure. Sure, Jeff. One moment here.
Got it.
Okay, can everyone see that okay?
Here you go. Yeah. So this session with Leonard Armato is, we're calling it Building Career Success, How to Create Value. And we touched a little bit on this last night when Leonard joined us as the keynote. And I came across this and I thought, that really speaks to how I feel. And Albert Einstein knew a lot about a lot of things, that theoretical physicist. I don't know how much about sports business, but boy, what he says here really, it really resonated with me, which is not that you're not trying to be successful, of course you are, but rather than to have a goal of something like, I want to be the richest person in the world, or I want to, win this award, this prize, like focusing on the value you bring to a company is so important. And really, I think he's speaking here about, like your character, that kind of value. So it's that, and it's also what you think of yourself as far as when someone is going to hire you, what are they getting? So if you think in terms of the value you bring, your value add, Leonard calls it a value proposition. What is that? If you can work on determining what that is and being able to articulate it, that's something that you can bring to any interview, and it will be reflected in your resume too. I don't know if Ron, if you have the pyramid of success. If you don't, that's okay. I'll mention it. But I mentioned John Wooden's pyramid of success. My students have, I think, heard me say this, but what I find very interesting about that pyramid, and it's impacted people around the world since Coach Wooden finished it in the late 50s, early 60s. Nowhere in the pyramid, this is arguably the greatest coach in the history of team sports. There you go. Thanks, Ron. His teams won 10 national championships, including 7 in a row. I mean, they built a statue for you now if you win 2. His teams won 10, including 7 in a row. Nowhere on the pyramid is there a reference to winning. Nowhere. It's competitive greatness that he's searching for, and that he's asking his players to find competitive greatness. And the reason is because, and even in his definition of success, peace of mind, direct result of self-satisfaction, knowing you did your best to become the best that you're capable of becoming. There's no reference to winning. It's if you are a person of value, and in this case, you're a competitor, then winning is a byproduct of that. That's something that can happen if things go right. Sometimes when you might be at your best and it's still not good enough to win. But the emphasis here isn't on winning, it's on being at your best, and that's part of that, finding that value you can bring to a team. Leonard was a great point guard in college, like having a coach on the floor. He was concerned with executing a game plan and being the coach, on the extension of the coach, doing all the things right. Sometimes, many times that would lead to victories, but not always. You can go back to the quote, Ron, if you can. So again, I would just say you have to be strategic every step of the way as you build your career. What we touched on this morning in networking and resume building and during interviews, just being strategic, having a plan. Our very special guest today, Leonard Armato, took a very strategic approach as a young lawyer entering the sports representation space, and was willing to put his career, almost his life, on the line because he believed in himself, and he desperately needed to convince a key client that he was worth the gamble. He had a value proposition, which he will explain. Besides being a good friend and a great resource for young people, I consider Leonard to be a sports marketing and sports business genius and a true visionary. Quick overview, I mentioned about playing at the University of Pacific. He grew up in Manhattan Beach, went to Maricosta High School. He was a freshman basketball player at USC, and when his freshman coach was hired to become the coach at UOP, Stan Morrison, he followed him there and became an all-conference point guard, one of the best players in the history of the school. Stan is a close friend of mine, and I'm grateful that he connected Leonard and I. It's been wonderful getting to know Leonard better. He graduated from the University of San Diego Law School, entered the sports agent business, and his very first client was the All-America safety at USC, and now in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Ronnie Lott. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was his first NBA client. He's worked with Shaquille O'Neal. He still works with Shaq to this day. Hakeem Olajuwon. He understood that athletes have the power to be influencers and market leaders. And this was before everybody was concerned about building their brand. Leonard saw the light on that and how important that athletes could be to be influencers and how they could touch other fields like entertainment and lifestyle, education and technology. He created the AVP Pro Beach Volleyball Tour. It became a $40 million business within 5 years. He's since created 2 other volleyball properties, the World Championships of Beach Volleyball and the World Series of Beach Volleyball, which combines sports, music, and lifestyle, like no other, I should add. He was the chief marketing officer of Skechers, helped it become the fastest growing footwear company in the world. He worked with celebrities like Kim Kardashian, Mark Cuban, sports stars like Joe Montana. He's now the founder and CEO of Management Plus Enterprises, doing some terrific things. Again, he's still working with Shaq, who, by the way, is everywhere in media today, as we know. He's building, developing high growth brands, again, converging the worlds of sports, entertainment, experiences, marketing, technology. He's active in the metaverse, NFT, Web 3.0 space with some exciting projects coming up that we'll get into. And as I mentioned yesterday, he always signs his emails warmly. So I'd like to give another warm welcome to my good friend, Leonard Armato. Leonard.
Well, thank you, Jeff. That was a beautiful introduction. And as I said yesterday, anytime I'm introduced in the future, you are my guy, and I refuse to come into any event whatsoever without Jeff Bellinger as the one introducing me. So thank you for that nice introduction. I also want to give a shout out at the beginning, and I know Ron met this woman, Felisa Israel, but she has a really interesting program called Impact Learning Institute. Impact Learning Institute. And you students out there that want to go deeper into sports, media, and entertainment, it's a really terrific program. Felisa used to be at the NBA for many years, headed up entertainment for the NBA, and also headed up some best business practices division. So she's had a lot of experience in sports, but the nice thing is that she brings all kinds of industry leaders to the table, just like you guys do, Ron and Jeff, so that students can learn from the best and students can learn from people with practical experience. So a quick shout out to Impact Learning Institute, and let's get into it. Jeff, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, maybe we go back to you coming out. I know you touched on a little bit yesterday, but for some of the students that weren't there, I mentioned about creating value, and that's sort of the overall theme of the session is building your career, but figuring out what your value proposition is. And as I mentioned, you kind of laid everything on the line in going after Ronnie Lott, and it looked like an impossible mountain to climb. You coming out of law school with no clients, and Ronnie being courted by every major sports agent in the country. So I'm looking back, like what did it take to get Ronnie to buy into your vision for him, and what lessons did you learn during that process?
Well, let's start with the concept that you introduced early on, which is value proposition, which I always like to say, what makes you special and unique? What sets you apart? Look into your heart of hearts and determine how you can communicate that value to whoever it is you're trying to influence. Mark Cuban says, the most important thing a business person can do is develop their ability to sell. Doesn't matter whether you're the CEO or the lowest member of the totem pole, you have to know how to sell and sell yourself. And it has to be honest. It can't be contrived. It can't be based on false promises, but it has to really tap into the heart of what makes you special and unique, and you got to be able to communicate that. So to your point about Ronnie Lott, it was really seemingly an impossible task. And I sort of started to visualize how I could somehow build a relationship with him. And I started to think about myself representing him and visualizing how we'd build a relationship even before I even met him. And then it was a matter of figuring out how I could get around his primary concern, which was, you got no experience. How can I trust that you can make good decisions? You don't have a track record. How can I feel comfortable? And so the way that I approached it, and I told this story in detail yesterday, is I made him an offer that he couldn't refuse. And the offer he couldn't refuse is that I would work for him for free for 30 days to prove myself. But I also, as part of that, infused my value proposition. And my value proposition, unlike the other fancy agents that had 30, 40, 50, 60 clients each, my value proposition was full, complete dedication and attention. And I told him I would direct all of that to him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Now, I had to prove that he could feel confident I would be able to represent him effectively. And that's why I gave him that free trial period. So my message to everybody out there is identify your value proposition and don't be afraid to work for free to prove yourself, because if you're great, eventually you'll make yourself indispensable.
So Leonard, the sort of the changing landscape today in sports business. I mentioned about your work in the metaverse and Web 3.0 spaces, and I'm wondering, like, what changes you've seen, like where we are right now, what you think is important for students coming into the sports business industry to be familiar with, aware of, and ready to make a contribution to.
Yeah, so the first thing I would tell everybody is don't get paralyzed by being anxiety filled because you can't know everything, learn everything, because information is just flowing at the fastest rate in history. It doubles every single year. So you got to be comfortable with not knowing, but embracing an always learning mentality. And also having this sense of curiosity, which sort of fuels you to learn more and more and more all the time. So, the way that things have changed in sports and media is really interesting. It's kind of like the way the internet has evolved. If you recall, the internet used to be this egalitarian place where everybody had a web address and it was really free and seemed like an incredible democratized opportunity for everyone. And then all of a sudden we see what they call Web 2.0, where all of these platforms started to aggregate data and develop massive amounts of power. When I say platforms, I'm talking about Google, who would sell your data without you knowing it and make tons of money, or Facebook, who would sell your data without you knowing it and make a whole bunch of money, and all the other platforms that basically were an intermediary between you and whatever it is that the value was. So now there's this thing called the blockchain. And the blockchain is determined, or the people behind it, to decentralize power and give every individual the right to own and control their own data, including your personal information, and own and control your own IP. So just imagine that the blockchain is sitting there and you have a locker on that blockchain. And in that locker contains all of the things of value that you possess: your name, your image, your likeness, your information, plus whatever you've created. And what you're able to do in Web3 is create what's called a smart contract, which gives people direct access to everything of value that you possess in return for an immediate transaction that you set the terms of in advance. You don't have to wait for a trusted intermediary. You don't have to wait for payment for 6 months, or, in the case of a wire transfer, for 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 days. You get it right then, right now, and no one's in the way. So how it applies in today's world. You probably heard of NBA Top Shots. NBA Top Shots was a way that collectibles started to become things of value, digital collectibles, not just physical ones. And digital collectibles all of a sudden became something you could acquire, and through what's called an NFT, registered on the blockchain as your ownership that's immutable but publicly transparent. So all of a sudden, we started to realize in the world of marketing that an NFT and the blockchain could combine digital collectible assets as well as utility, products, and access to communities. So it all of a sudden becomes the next wave level of direct-to-consumer marketing. And the interesting part about having a direct relationship with people is that there is no intermediary getting in the way of that transaction, in the way of that relationship. And it goes directly to the consumer from the IP holder. It's a really interesting evolution, and we're seeing this happen more and more all the time. So I encourage everybody out there, if you're interested in sports, media, and entertainment, understand blockchain technology, understand the underlying value of an NFT and where it's heading, and be open to learning more and more all the time because it's changing really fast.
Yeah. That's Leonard, such a great example of having to be nimble and flexible and to change on the fly, which you had to do. How has it been received by the athletes that you work with? And it seems like there's so many that are anxious to jump into the space that encompasses technology and innovation. Like that seems to really suit today's athletes. So many NBA players, especially the ones that happen to work in the Silicon Valley area, are really anxious to connect with folks in that, in that area, in that industry. Like that, there seems to be really excitement about combining like their athletic pursuits with innovation.
Yeah, Jeff, it's really interesting and exciting in the area of sports, because think of all these athletes or entertainers or whoever it is that's famous as influencers that can affect their fans directly through whatever platform they're on. Now, in the future, they won't have to rely on Facebook to get to their fans. They won't have to rely on Instagram to get to their fans. You'll be able to go directly to their fans and monetize every one of their fans. So we always tell all the athletes or celebrities we work with, you need to be a great content creator. When I say that, a communicator to your fans so they will engage with you and that you can grow that audience more. One great example, Jeff, is when I was at Skechers. We were a company, and I mentioned this yesterday, that only did mass media advertising. We advertised on TV, we advertised in print. And that's what our owner, our founder, wanted to do. He was kind of old school. And I started to tell him that digital marketing was something that was growing. And so what ended up happening is I brought him an influencer at the time that digital marketing was growing. We put that influencer in an advertisement that was run in television and in print, but we also combined the mass and the social media in order to create 1 + 1 = 3. And it really did work well, and it exploded. And the name of that influencer is Kim Kardashian. So before we put her on the Super Bowl, people knew she was in a very narrow area. And now she's the most famous person in the world, probably with the biggest social following. And the moral of this story is that once you get this huge social following, you can go direct to consumer and sell them products if they have an affinity for you. So Kim Kardashian, by the way, is now a billionaire because her Skims is a huge company that she's been able to launch. Her sister, Kylie, is not too far behind her because she launch Kylie Cosmetics because people wanted to have the same makeup she did, and she could go directly to all of her fans. So it's a very exciting time for athletes, celebrities, influencers that can really enlist and engage the people that enjoy being a part of their world.
So Leonard, what was the key to developing Shaq's brand? I mean, we see him now everywhere, and you just assume like he just rolled out, got out of bed, got on the basketball court, and then everything else was easy from there. He's got this huge personality, but I don't remember him at LSU as entering the NBA and people saying, "Oh yeah, he's a can't miss in anything he touches off the court." So that, as much as it seems like that great smile and that everyman appeal, like that was developed. Like how did that happen? And what was the key to Shaq's just the way he's entered our world off the court and been so successful at?
Yeah, that's such an interesting and kind of intricate progression. So when I first started talking to him about representing him, and it gets back to value proposition again, my value proposition to him was, look, Michael Jordan is this extraordinary endorser of products. He's amazing, but why don't we figure out a way to transform the way athletes are marketed so that you can own your own intellectual property, so that we will build a coalition of marketing partners that embrace your brand positioning and will use their money to build your brand, something we call OPM, other people's money to build your brand. And we developed a marketing coalition system around him. And we made sure that every company in our sphere, in our collective, was marketing him at the highest and most, exciting, creatively compelling level, so that it kept building his perception in the eyes of people. Now, today, we don't represent him for any of his so-called endorsements. We built the foundation of his brand over the course of over a decade. We're partners with him on projects that we own together, which is very exciting. So in a way, it's kind of nice because I don't have to worry about all the day-to-day stuff that is really, really detailed and also can be a little bit mundane at times. So we're sort of freed up, but at the same time, we have the benefit of the work we put in long ago.
So I talked this morning a little bit about like my keys to success. And I put at the top of my list, my students, I think are aware of this and they've looked at it. And I made number one on my list, make yourself invaluable. Like whatever you do, it goes to the value, what that is. Make yourself invaluable, whether it's performing a task as an intern or being behind the scenes working, but being part of a team effort, because it takes a team to build anything. And I'm curious, what are the things that are sort of the most important components for you when you're looking at hiring and bringing in young talent to work at Management Plus?
Yeah, I mean, well, if you think about the qualities that you need, and then I'll tell you sort of what we look for. The qualities you need, I think, are to, begin each day in gratitude and to just give thanks for all the blessings you have, because that's going to put you in the proper frame of mind to make each day a masterpiece, as our friend Coach Wooden loved to say. He coined that phrase, as you know. And then I think it's so important for you to understand the power and influence of relationships and how relationships can help you in so many different ways. Without Stan Morrison, who you talked about earlier, Jeff, I never would have met Ronnie Lott. And there's a lot of people in my life that gave me access to opportunities that wouldn't have happened except for the relationship I developed with them. Another thing to keep in mind is you got to be, if you're going to be in the sports business and a little bit of an entrepreneur, you got to be willing to fly without a safety net a little bit. You got to be willing to take some risks, and not be afraid of failing, because all of us have failed numerous times, and you got to figure out how to learn from each failure, dust yourself off, and get back into the ring, and start slugging it out again. And that's super important. Another part of it is optimism. I mean, that's a really important part of what it takes to be successful. You got to be eternally optimistic. I mean, yeah, you'll have setbacks, but optimism will be fueled by the right kind of energy. And then to your point, I think, making yourself indispensable. That's huge. Don't think of yourself as indispensable. Make yourself indispensable. Make the other people think you're indispensable. A lot of people think, oh, I'm indispensable, and they're really not. But the key is to make yourself that. And then finally, I would just say, I gave you my favorite quote yesterday from Aristotle. Excellence is not a single act, it's a habit. You are what you repeatedly do. You got to be consistent. People rely on consistency. That builds trust. And then, just getting to what we look for. I mean, I told you yesterday, and I read yesterday, our MPE manifesto. And I'm not going to read it all today, but bottom line is our chief aim is to improve the lives of others and enable greatness in everyone and everything we touch. And we want to inspire each other by working with remarkable people on remarkable things. So those kinds of things are important, and culture is so important at our company. We want everyone to believe in the same thing. We want everyone to have the same core values. And, I think Simon Sinek famously said, if you believe in the why, it's really easy to do the what. So we want everyone to believe in why we're in business, and that way we're all operating on the same page and we have clear goals we've set that we're all striving to achieve.
Leonard, I really love the Aristotle quote. Would you, we're at a high level today. We're quoting Einstein and Aristotle.
Well, wait, I got to tell you, Jeff, I got to tell you something about that because I'll forget.
Yeah.
So Shaq won the MVP, and I was standing with him, and he was about to receive the award. And he goes, what should I say when I get up there to receive the award? And I said, well, you were very consistent. And I said, well, my favorite quote is from Aristotle. Excellence is not a single act, it's a habit. You are what you repeatedly do. So he goes out there and he goes, thank you very much for giving me this award. And I just want to quote my favorite philosopher, Aristotle. Excellence is not a single act. You are what you repeatedly do. And from now on, you can call me the big Aristotle. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but remember he was calling himself.
Yes. That's great. I didn't know that. That's the story that it actually started with a quote from you right off to the side before he stepped forward. That's great. But the point is so good about being consistent and being reliable, and knowing what you're getting. I mean, a company knowing what they're getting with you.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, I mentioned too this morning something that Casey Wasserman always points out when he comes to my class. It's just, when I asked him one time what he would like to see from students when they're applying for jobs at his company, and he said, I'd like them to think about not telling me why the job is such a great job for them, because I assume it is. That's why they're applying for it. I'd like them to tell me why you're a good hire for me. Like, how are you going to make my company more successful? And I thought, there's a subtle difference there, but it's real. Like, rather than go on and on about how much you love the Dodgers or the Rams, or whatever team you might be applying for, or company. I know everything there is to know about the Dodgers. I tell you the history, which is all great, but how does that translate to how that's going to help this company become better? And I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts about that and the kind of things you might hear from somebody during an interview that could easily get into this idea of how much you love that company.
Well, that's a really interesting point, because it kind of gets back to the value proposition a little bit, because what you're trying to do is sell yourself to this person. And I always tell our team, I said, look, those people don't care about us, maybe. All they care about is how are they going to either look good or get their needs served. So they have their own set of goals, aspirations, KPIs, as they call it. And our job is to serve those needs. And we've got to figure out how to communicate our value proposition so they believe that our value proposition will connect with their goals and their aspirations. So, you know, I hear what Casey's saying. I mean, Casey and I know we've known each other. I've known him since he was 18 years old, you know, and you know, he's kind of, you know, comes from, you know, legendary stock, as you know. And we have a slightly different philosophy. He's a little more hardcore than I am about certain things. Like, I remember we were talking about what a good business deal is. And I said, a good business deal is when everybody's happy and everybody feels like they're in, you know, in partnership together and they love each other, you know, and that's a good business. He goes, no, I think a good business deal is when everyone is equally unhappy. That means they had to give a lot to make it work. And I'm like, okay.
Right.
So it just depends on, you know, I'd rather leave a couple of dimes on the table and, you know, and walk down the path with someone feeling like I gave a little more than I got, but it's okay. People have different philosophies.
Yeah. You talked about one thing I know it comes up a lot, and I think it's really important for students to keep in mind is being your authentic self. Like, you know, really being able to articulate what it is about you, that what are those, you know, just to be real. Like if you're, you know, for example, if you're not as much of a morning person as you are, can work late into the night, then don't characterize yourself that way in an interview. Like, I'll be the first one, hire me and I'll be the first one in, I'll the last one out. And you realize, like, you get the job, like, you know, I'm more one of those people that I get revved up and I can go well into the night. There's, like, you may want to balance the team as you're building with people like that and the person that wants to be the first one or whatever. So being able to speak really authentically, tell the truth about yourself, is, I think, so critical to, you know, developing and, you know, somebody believing in you, like believing in yourself first and to get others to believe in you. And I'm wondering if you have any.
No, that's a great point. And I always tell everyone at our company that you never want to sell anything to anyone that isn't good for them. So if you remember, part of our manifesto is to improve the lives of others. So everything we do has to be designed to improve the lives of others, clients, partners, whoever. And that's a really important part. Those types of things are key in teaching young people how to present themselves. And we never bluff. Like, it's just not, we don't tell people, oh, I got this other offer for twice as much as your offer if it doesn't exist. If it does exist, we'll tell them because it's being transparent and truthful. But we don't believe in making things up. We don't believe in lying. We don't believe in bluffing. And maybe some people, you know, are able to do that and be successful doing that, but that's just not in our DNA. That's not in our culture.
Yeah. So Leonard, with your career, when you had this great success in representing such high-profile athletes, being a former athlete yourself, you know, it was kind of like a natural thing. You could relate well to them. What was it that took you out of that space, being an agent / lawyer, that led you to want to be more of an entrepreneur and create things and do different things in your life?
Well, about the time that I was having the greatest success with Shaq, I've been representing him for a decade. We started doing things in new media during the period of the, you know, before the internet bubble burst. And I was really excited about the things that you could do as an entrepreneur in the tech space. And we'd done so many deals for him in the brand space. I don't want to say it wasn't exciting, you know, it was always exciting, but I started thinking and looking more towards the world of entrepreneurship. And that's about the time the AVP became available to acquire. And so what we did was we acquired it. We put men and women under one umbrella. So the AVP had not just men underneath it, whereas it used to in the past only had men. We put women underneath it. And then we had equal prize money and equal television time for both men and women. And, this was 20 years ago. So, we're proud that we were the first sport to ever provide equal prize money, equal TV time. And the result of that is women's beach volleyball is more popular than men's beach volleyball. And now it's an NCAA championship sport for women, which is phenomenal. We launched, people like Misty May, Carrie Walsh Jennings, 3 gold medals. My wife, Holly McPeak, went to 3 Olympics, 1 medal. So there's lots of women that have benefited from what we did, and I'm sort of proud of that. But yeah, I just have always loved building things, and beach volleyball was kind of the first lifestyle sport, the first sport you could actually watch a great athlete play and then have a good time at the same time. That's why it's the most popular sport at the Olympic Games.
And by the way, Leonard, I think that's a virtual background, but every time I see it, I think it's not that far from the reality of what you get to experience every day, surrounded so close to the beach down there. And it does make me wonder now, why wasn't that vision like an obvious one about what beach volleyball could represent, that it was a lifestyle thing, it was entertaining, it taps into so many things that are inherent to Southern California. And, it took you to come along and, and establish that vision and then go execute, your plan. It's just interesting to me that it was where it was when you kind of arrived.
Well, you have to think about it. Not too many people have access to the beach. And beach volleyball kind of started in the era of Baywatch, when the Southern California lifestyle was being exported to the world. So, we had all these beach volleyball players playing, and we used to call them volleyball gods, because they were just like, all they cared about was playing beach volleyball. At nighttime, they were waiters, so they could play volleyball all day. And it was a crazy little subculture. And I used to play beach volleyball as cross training for basketball. And it was a great cross training endeavor. It was a great, tough sport, running in the sand, jumping in the sand, all that stuff. So we just sort of felt like, since everyone wanted to export or import the California lifestyle, that if we wrapped corporate America around that, it could really work nicely, and it did.
Fantastic. I think the students probably have questions in their mind that they'd like to ask, discuss, and so we've set aside time to do that. We're wrapping up this part of the conversation now with Leonard, but he's graciously agreed to come back, and we'll just have a session after our next one, starting at 5 o'clock. Well, we'll just take some questions.
All right. Well, I'll be back at 5. I'm going to take a break, and thank you all for listening. And hopefully there were a few nuggets in there that were helpful. And then I'll be back at 5. And if there's questions, we can, answer them then.
It's fantastic. Fantastic, Leonard. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
I would just encourage you guys, whatever your thoughts are, anything you'd like to discuss with Leonard about individual characteristics for success in sports business, or something specific about any of the athletes he's worked with or projects he's worked on, bring it back to our session, our Q&A session. We're just going to sit here and chop it up, have fun, make it very interactive. So I'm excited about that part of the program too. Ron?
Yeah, terrific. Thank you, Jeff. And I just want to add to what Jeff's saying, that if you can also think to invite your friends, because it's 5 o'clock, and I know their classes are Friday, but I can't imagine there are a bunch of Friday evening classes. I just can't imagine that.
No chance.
So your friends should have some availability, and it's going to be early enough before they start partying. And so if they really want to get some valuable information that's going to really help them, for someone who's lived life, who's done a lot, and who has a real heart to give back, this is a great opportunity. You don't have to be here forever, but just have them say, hey guys, pop in for a few minutes, hear a little bit what Mr. Armato has to say, ask him some questions, and he gets insights. He has lots of interesting stories too. So I would send a text message, an email, Instagram, whatever you need to do to get your friends to pop in and to hear him. And the thing about this is that Jeff and I love doing things like this because it gives us a chance to be able to bring in wonderful people like Mr. Armato who want to share, but it really helps students who we really care about. And unfortunately, not enough students take advantage of this. And what we heard him share last night, all that you've heard today. There are so many students out there who are struggling and they're, trying to figure out things out. And there are people who are ready and available to help them, but they just need to take advantage of opportunities. So be a good friend. And if you've enjoyed what you've heard here already, let your friends know and have them come back, at 5 o'clock for a little bit and, and to engage in Mr. Armato. So at this point, we're going to take a break for probably about 5 minutes or so. Actually, about 10 minutes. And then Jeff's gonna come back and he's gonna talk about cover letters, elevator pitches, and then staying in touch through networking. But I wanted to put another quick plug into LinkedIn. If you didn't hear me this morning, LinkedIn is a professional platform. And if you are not on LinkedIn, I definitely encourage you to use it or set up a LinkedIn profile. If you're on LinkedIn and not using it, please use it, because it's a way to get connected with industry professionals or professionals from a number of different industries, whether it be sports or some other industry that you may have an interest in too. And it's also a way for you to show your value. And we've talked about value, having value proposition, but it's like a resume online where you're able to share, what you're studying, sharing internships, sharing projects you worked on, sharing volunteering, sharing passion projects, and what you're all about. And so definitely encourage you to create a LinkedIn profile and to use it. And it's also another way to reach out to folks to set up time to have these informational conversations. So I'll put a LinkedIn that you can actually screenshot. And if I can possibly